Remember, remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder, treason, and plot. I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot.
Hello guys, I'm CBMF Productions and welcome to the DC Imprint Retrospective. Today's film was the first DC Imprint film that was ever made, starring an A-list cast and a notable director in Road to Perdition. The film is based off the comic by Paradox Press, a comic company owned by DC under the same name. It was published in 1998 and went under for a couple years until Sam Mendes, who after directing American Beauty and receiving tons of praise for it, was looking to do something different for his next project, and eventually came across a script that was an adaptation of the comic and immediately became interested. And because this film was under DreamWorks, it came across Steven Spielberg, who liked the script so much he sent a copy to his buddy Tom Hanks while filming Castaway, and like Mendes, became interested. So Hanks signed on to the project. The film got its cast and crew together, which consists of many familiar faces from Jude Law, Paul Newman in his final live-action role, Daniel Craig in one of his earlier roles, before him and Mendes collaborated on Skyfall and Spectre, Tyler Hoechlin in his first role, and now ironically plays Superman in the CW universe, and even more recognizable faces as the film went into production, then post-production, and finally came out in mid-July 2002, coming out the same week I was born actually. And although the film wasn't a major hit due to it coming out in the middle of the summer, when this was definitely more for an Oscar season, especially since the film did win Best Cinematography for that year's Oscars, and it was received well by critics and audiences alike. But 18 years later, does this film hold up? Well, before we get into that, let's get into the plot. The film was set in Illinois during the Great Depression and Prohibition era in the winter of 1931. Michael Sullivan Sr., played by Tom Hanks, works as an enforcer, debt collector, and overall hitman for the mob boss John Rooney, played by Paul Newman, who raised Michael like he was his own son because he was an orphan. Michael keeps his job from his wife Annie, played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, in a nearly unrecognizable role, and his two sons, the younger brother being Peter, played by Liam Aiken, and the older brother being Michael Jr., played by Tyler Hoechlin, who decides to hide in his father's trunk one night to see what his father does after he attends a funeral for his father for one of Rooney's associates who died, and their brother Frank, played by Ciaran Hans, is pulled away after he's about to expose the Rooney family during his speech for something. Michael Jr. later sees his father and surrogate brother Connor Rooney, played by Daniel Craig, kill Frank and his goons after Connor shoots Frank in the head unexpectedly. Michael Jr. tries to run away, but is shot by a gate and his father and Connor catch him and make him swear not to tell anybody about what happened, even going as far as John making sure he keeps his mouth shut. But that doesn't stop Connor from trying to kill Michael's entire family, to tie up the loose ends, especially since Connor has jealousy issues due to John liking Michael more than his own son. So Connor goes to the Sullivan house and kills Annie and Peter, leaving Michael Jr. and Sr. to go on the road together to escape, but will also gain revenge. They head to Chicago to see if they can get any production from some of the other mobsters, but since they're all tied to Rooney, they can't get help. And one of the mobsters they try to talk to, Frank Nitti, played by Stanley Tucci, is actually hiding Connor after John forces him to make sure Michael Sr. doesn't find and kill him. And as damage control, Frank hires a hitman / crime scene photographer Harlan McGuire, played by Jude Law, to kill Michael Sr. but leave Jr. alive. Michael tracks both of them down at a diner, and while talking with Michael Sr., he knows something fishy's up with them, so they escape. Michael's next plan is to rob all the mob money from the banks in Chicago to try and hit them up where it hurts, to turn them off against the Rooneys. And while trying to find information from Rooney's accountant, Alexander Rance, played by Dylan Baker, he finds out that Connor has been stealing from his father, and that's why he killed Frank in the beginning, because he was gonna tell the truth. But quickly after that, Harlan shows to kill Michael, revealing his whole scene was staged, but he makes it out alive, with Harlan accidentally killing Rance, and Michael scoring his face when he shoots a glass face in the rim is Pearson. Although Michael does get shot while his son drives away, which Michael Sr. has been teaching Michael Jr. how to drive over the course of the past few weeks as they've done these bank robberies. Michael Jr. stops by an old couple in a farmhouse to fix up his father and gives them a couple days to relax before heading to Michael's sister's beach house in Perdition, Michigan. But not before Michael confronts John in the basement of a church and tells him the truth to hopefully let him give up his son, but John refuses because it's his bloodline and that they're all gonna go to hell anyway. Later that night, while John is walking into his car with his bodyguards surrounding him, Michael kills all of them using a Tommy gun except John, who says that he's glad that Michael's the one to kill him before Michael obliterates him with bullets. And after he gets permission and the location from Nitti to kill Connor to end his feud, he goes to where Connor is and shoots him in the head while taking a bath. With the death settled, Michael Jr. and Sr. go to the beach house to hopefully start a new life together to put the past behind them. But Harlan shoots Michael Sr. twice in the back after he enters the empty house, implying that he also killed his sister and her husband too. But Michael Jr. puts a gun to Harlan's head after he is framing his bleeding dad for a photo shoot, but Michael Sr. shoots him to prevent his son from going down the same rabbit hole he went down, as he dies in his son's arms. The film ends with Michael Sr.'s narration that also started the film, coming from an older perspective despite the same 12-year-old voice, talking about how his father's only fear was him following in his footsteps, that he never held against us in the encounter with Harlan, and answers the question that started the film, saying if his father was a good man, and only replies that he was his father, as Michael Jr. returns to the old couple's farmhouse to be raised, after saying they wanted kids earlier but were too old to make one, as credits roll. you can definitely tell this film feels more prestigious than a lot of the other comic book films I've reviewed, because it's barely even one, like the majority of the films in this retrospective. Sam Mendes is a great director, and he was a really solid choice for the film. While other directors could have gone in a more traditional direction with how the film was framed and shot, Mendes uses a lot of moving arc shots and creativity with the camera to make you feel more immersed in the film. The best scenes of the film, in my opinion, is the almost one-shot take of Michael Sr. walking down that hotel to kill Connor, and we actually don't see the kill, but we see the aftermath of it in the door mirror, or when Michael shoots all the bodyguards in the rainy street before killing John. Shots like that will stick with you long after the credits roll, and it definitely deserves the Oscar for best cinematography. Another aspect that really helps the film is the acting. Of course, when you have a stacked cast like this, everybody in the film does really well. Tom Hanks does a great subdued performance as his father who has something to hide, and the banter and chemistry with his son Tyler Hoechlin, who does really well for a child actor in his first role, does serve well for what the film needs. Jude Law plays a really creepy villain along with Daniel Craig, Paul Newman is good as the mob boss of the heart, and even the smaller roles like Stanley Tucci are all done well. The production design is top notch and makes you feel like you're in the 30s. For the most part, the film's pace is a lot more fast than you expect. The film has a lot of good dialogue from the church basement scene between John and Michael Sr., the father-son banter. It all feels natural from the characters. Along with that, Thomas Newman's score is also beautifully haunting and captures the perfect atmosphere that the film is going for. And that one of the monster movies, although it's not a Scorsese level masterpiece, it's still one that kind of stands out from the pack. Easily the film's weakest fault that keeps it from being great in my opinion is the lack of characterization. You don't get to know much about the characters in the film. We get hints of Michael's past in the father-son triangle, but we don't get the motivations as to why he joined the mob and how that's affected him psychologically or his family life. Alongside that, we basically know nothing about the son aside from the narration in the beginning and the end that feels very tacked on and throws you off because it's meant to be an older man from the lines, but because it's from a kid's voice, it doesn't hammer the point home. They should have gotten an older man to do those lines like Polar Express did, if we're talking about Tom Hanks films with narration that open and book in this story. But back to my main point, with very little established with any of the characters besides their family or mob ties, it feels like you're watching these characters at an arm's distance, and feels like you would have worked better as a short story. Sam Mendes would later perfect this kind of idea in 1917, because that film was more about the experience and not so much about the emotions. Well, this film has a lot of emotional moments that just kind of fall flat. You just don't care as much because the story doesn't really get you invested. It's really just all the other aspects that really kind of carry it up. The story itself isn't all that original, and the film doesn't do much to surprise you because it does have a lot of cliche story beats that we've seen from other films. It's just elevated by the direction, score, cinematography. And also, it's not the film's fault because it came out first, but I couldn't stop comparing this to Logan, a gritty road trip comic book film starring a father with a past and a child that causes the whole story to get going. Being chased by a villain to hunt them down and kill them, stopping by a farmhouse to take a breather, the father and child having strife in the beginning but slowly start to bond, the main mentor older father figure getting killed towards the end, leading to the villain killing the father before the villain dies by getting shot, and the father dying in the child's arms, before the child leads off into their own lives, changed by the experience. I'm not blaming Logan for ripping this film off, it's probably just a coincidence, but because I saw Logan first, the comparisons were definitely distracting. Another issue is that the film has a really bad passage of time. The film was meant to take place over the course of 6 weeks, and apart from Tom Hanks' facial hair changing, you don't really feel the weight or the length of the story. On top of that, another issue is how the film will randomly drop characters in and out of the movie for long periods of time, such as Connor Rooney or Harlan, almost making you forget that they were even part of the film, and that can lead to the film dragging a little bit in spots, because it does mean from jumping the plot point to plot point and balancing out our heroes and villains. Overall, Road to Perdition is a good film and a good start to this retrospective. This is an entertaining film that has great acting, beautiful cinematography, a haunting score, well-placed production design, well-written dialogue, solid pacing, and a great director in the helm of Sam Mendes. But what keeps the film being great in my opinion is that it's not emotionally that investing. The film doesn't get you well versed in the characters, and when we do get to know about them, they really seem like archetypes rather than actual characters, and that leads to a lot of emotional moments in the film feeling empty, and makes it feel like a basic mom revenge flick, but with some prestige actors and crew behind it. Along with the film dropping characters and plot points throughout, making it feel messy at points, and make it drag a little bit towards the middle, some weird narration, and a lot of comparisons to Logan. Again, it's not this film's fault, but that's my experience. And overall, not be the most noteworthy or groundbreaking film from either the comic book or mob genre, but as a whole, the film is still good at telling this simple story because of how well put together it is, and how much visual flair it has to keep you invested. And if you do scroll past this film on like HBO Max, it wouldn't be a bad pick to check out. I give Road to Perdition a B, an 8 out of 10, and a rented recommendation. So that's Road to Perdition. What do you guys think about it? Leave your thoughts down in the comments, and please don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. I'm CBMF Productions, and remember, the past can't hurt you anymore unless you let it.